It's Tuesday, November 10th, 2020. I'm Pastor Thor Ramsey with Center Church. This is Gospel for Five, where we take 5 minutes out of our day, focus on the gospel, on the one who saved our souls, because Jesus is the gospel. We ended yesterday in verse 14. Now today we begin the third segment of chapter 2, the final segment of chapter 2, and really verse 16 really summarizes the gospel message. If you don't think Paul's preaching you're saved by grace plus nothing, verse 16 really nails that down. So let's begin in verse 15. We ourselves are Jews by birth and not Gentile sinners. And we'll see later what he means by that. But the point is, Peter and those who are swept away by his hypocrisy, who were influenced by the Judaizers, were making a distinction between the types of Christians there were. The good kind of Christians, the right kind of Christians who believed grace plus circumcision or grace plus becoming Jewish, and then these inferior Christians who just believed grace plus nothing. So Paul he's really being somewhat ironic here, saying we're Jews by birth. We're the good kind, right? We're not like those Gentile sinners. Yet, he says, yet. So there's the key where you can see he's being ironic in verse 15. In verse 16, he begins it with, yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law. So justified meaning we're not declared, justification meaning declared not guilty in God's sight. So he says, we know that a person is not declared not guilty in God's sight. Yet we know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. We also have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law, because by works of the law no one will be justified. Boy, let me just read it one more time smoothly through, because you can't get clearer than this. This is as crystal clear as you can get concerning how can we be saved? What's the basis of our salvation? Well, have you heard these little phrases? Grace plus nothing. You're saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. Where do those come from? Listen to this. We know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. So we also have believed in Christ Jesus in order to be justified by faith in Christ and not by works of the law, because by works of the law no one will be justified. You can't get any clearer than that. Grace plus nothing. That's the truth of the gospel that the Apostle Paul is preserving. But if, in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we too were found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? Now, what's he saying there? Doesn't really flow well in the ESV translation here. Let me read you this New Living Translation, verse 17. But if we seek to be made right with God through faith in Christ, and then we are found guilty because we have abandoned the law, would that mean Christ has led us into sin? It's really one of the same charges Paul is answering in more detail in the book of Romans. If we're saved by grace plus nothing, does that mean we're abandoning the law? And if we're saved by grace plus nothing, does that mean we can act any way we want? And is Christ then leading us into sin? Should we sin that grace may abound? Now he's just asking it differently here. It's much clearer in Romans, thank God, but still the same idea. But if in our endeavor to be justified in Christ, we are found to be sinners, is Christ then a servant of sin? In other words, if you say that you're justified, that you're not guilty in God's sight because of Christ, but someone finds out you're still a sinner, does that mean Christ is justifying sin? That's really the question here. Paul's answer, certainly not. Again, it's this idea, it's a misunderstanding. Well, in one sense, people who ask that question critically or skeptically get the gospel in one sense and miss it in another. They at least get the basic idea that the gospel is you're saved by grace plus nothing, not your behavior. So you're saying these people can just believe in Jesus and be forgiven. Yes, that's what we're saying. Anybody? Yes. So Christ is leading you into sin. You can live any way you want. See, now Paul says certainly not. And we'll see why tomorrow. Now, what has God said to you today?